Alright, you've got your sear there, your safety lever, which goes like that, lines up with the hole on the sear with this knob facing up and that tab facing out. Then you got the sear spring, which sits in here, and then the extractor, the back hole of the extractor. You have to line all this up with this with the pin here. So the best way to do this, I'm going to start the pin from the left. Maybe. Alright, I'm going to slide on the extractor, which the front hole goes on that, there's a metal pin there. Alright, I'm going to slide this through, just barely. Next, I'm going to slide the sear in from this side. It's got to come up under. And this is where it gets a little tricky. Underneath, you're lined up there. Work the sear pivot pin forward. It doesn't really like to go forward, but it's going to because, alright, engage it into the sear. Now, I'm going to put the sear pivot pin in, which I'm going to leave loose. I'm not going to put it on that pin and create tension yet. Slide that through a little more. And lastly, slide in the safety lever, which has to come in from the bottom. I don't know if you can see any of this or not. There you go. Now we're going in there. Slide you all the way in. Equal on both sides. And there you go. Now, I'm going to push this spring down and engage it under that post. I should really have a different tool for this, but I'm going to use a flat-bladed screwdriver and I'm going to make it work. There you go. Alright. Next comes the decocking mechanism. Remember we had this bushing that goes in on the back side. Only fits in there one way. Turn her over this way. Put some oil on the back of this where it rubs up against the frame. Don't fall out, bushing. And put your finger in there and hold that bushing in place from behind. Drop the decocking lever into place. And then decocking spring goes like so. Come on, get in there, you prick, you. There we go. Seal on in that little hole. It's easier if you got needle nose pliers. I'm trying to do it by hand. Alright, once the decocking lever is in place, you can test out your hammer. When you go into decock, you're going to have to push it forward manually to test it because there's no hammer spring yet. And that's what we're moving on to next. It's the hammer spring assembly. There's your hammer strut. You got to get that up in there, and this tang is going to be towards the back, and this front round portion is going to sit on the large pin in the hammer. There was the little pin that we put underneath the hammer reset spring, but there's a large round pin in the hammer, and that's what we want this little round part to sit on. So you got to kind of fish it up in there. Take some patience. I'll put some grease on that end because that's going to rock. There. We go, and it kind of goes up in there and moves towards the back. And again, I'm not an expert, so there's probably an easier way to do this, but I don't know what it is. Then we get the hammer, or the main spring up on there. And finally, the main spring seat. Push there. And I'm going to use my fingers, try not to slip. Press that back into position. And you can function test it. Alright, now with the gun reassembled this far, I'm going to go ahead and modify this mag catch lever. I wanted to put it back together this far so that I can put the grips on, so I can test fit. And of course the grips aren't going to stay on. I'm only going to do this temporarily, but I wanted it put back together this far so I can test it out.